Optical viewfinder, not an analog camera. Hey viewers, in this video I'm going to review the Fujifilm X100V for you, but first I'm going to dedicate this video to my Aunt Lillian, who passed away recently. And while we were in the Netherlands for her funeral, we visited my cousin Anke and her husband Vincent. He was pretty excited to show me his new X100V and had some questions about how to use it effectively. Now, Vincent is a skilled and experienced photographer who has done some very interesting work related to the environmental issues that are important to him. And he has provided some of the images, butterflies, boats, and fungi, I've used in this video. I'll post a link to his photos in the description. Anyway, when I got home, I asked Fujifilm if I could borrow an X100V, because I did not review it when it was released last year, and here it is. This camera is on loan from Fujifilm Canada, but they are not compensating me for this video and have had no editorial input of its contents. A lot of the attraction that you and I and Vincent have for this camera is the classic design. The black and stainless combo is a little retro. It is the archetypal camera design. It looks old and new. The design and feel of the buttons and dials remind me of controls on the rangefinder camera my mother brought with us when we moved to Canada. Now, it's small enough for Vincent to put in a coat pocket. Another reason he likes this model. And the design aesthetic means the grips, front and back, are minimal. And like my mother's camera, the lens is integrated. With the battery, the X100V weighs 478 grams, about the same as my mother's. And both have an optical viewfinder. And this switch flips the X100V to an electronic viewfinder when you need. For my detail-oriented viewers, I do appreciate that this is not the strictly traditional use of the term rangefinder. The lens is equivalent to 35mm with a maximum aperture of f2. And while design is important, it's image quality that counts. The 26-megapixel APS-C-sized 4th-generation X-Trans sensor delivers crisp, clear and detailed images with excellent color, great dynamic range. And that's in part because X-Trans doesn't need an optical low-pass filter. And the integrated lens enables a feature you rarely find on digital cameras, a lens or leaf shutter, instead of the standard focal plane shutter. You can watch it close in front of the aperture blades. While focal plane shutters can be a little faster, leaf shutters provide a cleaner image, as the scene is evenly exposed while the image is taken. Photographers using flash will also find a leaf shutter preferable, and although the X100V does have an anti-flicker feature, a leaf shutter is less susceptible. Last thing, it's very quiet. The integrated lens also enables a 4-stop internal ND filter. And the X100V includes a good selection of Fujifilm's film simulations, but not Eterna bleach bypass or nostalgic negative. And I'm always drawn to the Acros Mono Sim. It really encourages my creativity. Now, operationally, it's a pleasure to use, particularly for those who are comfortable with manual operation. Aperture is set on the lens using the handy grips, f2 to f16, and an A position for auto aperture. Set the ISO by lifting and turning the ring around the shutter dial. The setting appears in the window, 160 to 12,800. Again, A for auto. The shutter dial sets from 1/4000 to 1 second with timer and bulb, which can go up to 60 minutes. Because of the leaf shutter, 1/4000 is not available. With apertures larger than f4.5, setting turns orange to warn you. At f2, the shutter speed will actually be 1/2000. And those limitations don't apply when using the electronic shutter. It goes up to 1/32,000. To go beyond 4000 or access the 1/3 stop increments between positions on the dial, use the rear dial. That control set means there's no need for a PASM dial, as you directly control the exposure settings using a physical dial or automate the setting you want the camera to control. and the X100V gets a lot of respect just for that detail. The LCD, a 1.6 m.3 by 2 aspect 3-inch screen, flips up and down. The hybrid viewfinder can flip from a reverse Galilean optical with an advanced Albada-type settings overlay to electronic with the flip of the front panel lever. The bright and detailed electronic viewfinder is a 3.69 m. OLED with a 4:3 aspect. The diopter range is -4 to +2. The white outline frame is a visual guide to the image framing and resets with focus to provide a more accurate composition. The included lens can focus as close as 10 centimeters. That looks like this with a 7-centimeter Playmobil figure. The focus mode switch is positioned on the left side, single, continuous, and manual. Press the joystick and turn either the front or back dial to select one of 10 focus sizes. Use the joystick to position. A soft press on the shutter sets focus, although all the way from wide to close is a little slow. In manual, the blue bar on the distance ruler indicates the depth of field at this aperture, and we're also getting a good sense of the bokeh on this lens. When you're using the optical viewfinder, press the switch the other way to get a small inset focus preview for accurate focusing. Use the joystick to position. With the electronic viewfinder or the LCD, press the back dial for expanded view, turn it to switch between the two sizes. Again, joystick positions. That's the basics, but there are several menu options that manage focus. I'll get to those later. And I've customized the tiny key beside the shutter for the film simulation menu. They preview as you scroll through them. And setting any of these features doesn't require you to access the camera's main or quick menu. For me, that facilitates easy and quick operation, very old school, if you like that kind of thing. Let's finish the controls. You will need the menu to activate the onboard flash, guide number 4.4, at ISO 1600, usable to 7 meters. There is a flash hot shoe, an extensive menu control for external flashes, and there are right side ports for a 2.5mm mic input. That's smaller than the usual 3.5. The USB-C and micro HDMI are so closely packed together that connecting both simultaneously is close to impossible. USB-C can both charge and power the camera. Battery and card door on the bottom. There's one SD card slot, UHS Type 1 is supported, and the standard Fujifilm 126S battery, SEPA rated for 350 shots. There are a few things missing that I've enjoyed on other Fujifilm models. There's no D-pad, although the joystick means you don't really miss it. I do miss the customization and control offered by the 4 buttons. And there's no view mode button to switch between LCD and viewfinder. That's controlled in the menu. Before starting with the menu, there's nothing easier than updating the firmware in a Fujifilm camera. Just add the camera to Fujifilm's free camera remote app. A pop-up alerts you that there's new firmware, which it installs on the camera. Would everyone else please do this? And this video is recorded with firmware 2.01. Let's continue with focus. The menu's AF/MF tab. Here, you can increase the number of focus points from 117 to 425. The selection screen shows you the coverage. It's nearly the entire scene. And autofocus isn't as speedy as some, so if situations warrant, the AF range limiter lets you speed it up by limiting the focus range. Now, I showed the standard expanded view manual focus assist. Photographers who are familiar with analog focusing systems may prefer the digital split image where you line up the edges, or the digital microprism emulation. Also worth noting that if you assign the back exposure focus lock button to AF on, you can autofocus even in manual mode. Most photographers call that back button focus and use it when they don't want the camera to focus with each shutter press. Focus Peak Highlight, 4 colors, 2 settings are available, displaying a color edge around objects in focus. Activate Focus Check, and the X100V punches in automatically when the focus ring is adjusted. The X100V includes face and eye detect with multiple eye options. On the Image Quality tab, 3 aspects: standard 3x2, as well as 16:9 for images destined for video, and square for social media. I shoot fine plus RAW, but there are other settings available. RAW files are saved as 14-bit with a lossless compression option. There are many more image quality adjustments, and many of you will want to configure those settings and copy or create your own recipes. Even if you're happy with Fujifilm's color science and have a favorite film simulation, this provides the opportunity to fine-tune settings and create your personal color science. If that's your intent, it's best to start with the Q menu. The tiny key labeled Q on the right side grip opens the quick access menu. Its operation is less than intuitive. I still often press the wrong thing. The top left option selects one of the 7 custom settings. That's where you'll access the recipes you save. On the Q menu, use the joystick to navigate to the option you're changing. Or, if touch is turned on, just tap it to open the choices. Then tap your selection to confirm. If you're not using tap, the rear dial changes the setting. Press Q again to close. The Setup menu can edit the Q menu options, making it the easiest way to select a recipe and to make changes to color and tone settings while snapping. I choose the transparent background to help me see the effect of the changes I'm making. I'm going to use the 16 option selection. You can choose fewer if that works better for you. To change the defaults, select a position, then click through to the selection menu. I recommend that you populate this menu with image quality options, all the settings used to create recipes. So I start with film simulation, white balance, and dynamic range priority. If you're trying to follow along, you'll need to pause to catch up. I'm moving highlight, shadow, color, and the grain effect to the second row. In the third row, color chrome and color chrome blue, then sharpness and clarity. Last row, face eye detect, shutter, flash, and ND. If you choose a 12-option Q menu, you can forgo those last 4. Now, the Q menu is your one-stop shop for finding and changing your recipes. To create a sample recipe for vivid color landscapes, Velvia Film Sim, Auto White Balance, DRP Strong, that overrides highlight and shadow, color +4, grain off, chrome strong, chrome blue strong, sharp +2, clarity +5, face detect off, mechanical shutter, flash off, ND off. And after creating the settings, save them and create a name for your recipe. For this example, landscape seems to be appropriate. There's also an option to edit the setting using the menu. Changes you make here are saved. Recall your recipe using the Q menu, making more changes in the field if necessary. Those changes will need to be explicitly saved back in the menu. And remember that the recipe settings are applied to the JPEG image, but not the RAW file. So, if you take an image and the recipe didn't do it justice, X100V's playback menu has a RAW conversion option. And the only note here is that some settings, like dynamic range priority, can be reduced, but not increased, so strong can be changed to weak, but not the reverse. There are more creative settings. On the Drive menu, there's an HDR setting that ranges from Auto to Plus. There are advanced filters, a few options, the usual suspects, and multi-exposure. Combine up to 9 exposures using one of 4 methods to combine the images. If you're in the mood to experiment, this provides lots of opportunity. Get creative. Macro photographers will appreciate the focus bracket, taking multiple images, each with a slight change in focus distance. Again, experimentation is key to getting the best results for your creative vision. There's no in-camera focus stacking, but that's easily done in Photoshop. And then there are brackets for dynamic range, film simulation, exposure, and white balance. This menu also has burst modes. With the mechanical shutter, continuous shooting at 8 frames lasts for 8 seconds before slowing to 6. 11 frames goes 3 seconds before slowing to 6. And in my opinion, for this camera, 6 is a perfectly reasonable burst rate. Even more options with the electronic shutter. The highest speed ones have a crop and take even fewer images at the high rate before slowing down. There are a lot of ways to customize the camera, starting with the extensive display options. A feature I really love about this and all Fujifilm models. I can populate the screen with exactly the options I want displayed. The large indicators mode makes it easier to see the settings but has fewer display options. And there are 2 custom keys, one on top, one inside the viewfinder switch, with a variety of possible alternate assignments. The 4 swipe directions on the touchscreen can be customized to activate specific functions. It works, but it's not super reliable. And as I pointed out, the exposure focus lock can also be customized. I prefer AF on. Now, had I been the product manager for this camera, I would not have felt a need to include video or features like Sports Finder and Touch. The even burst detracts slightly from the X100V's overall aesthetic. But let me gloss over those features. Video mode goes up to 4K, both 16 and 17:9 aspects, up to 30 frames, 200 megabits data rate using the H.264 codec. That's very good. 60 frames available in HD, high-speed record, 120 frames for up to 5 times slow is also an HD feature. F-Log is supported, as is HDMI Clean Out. There's Zebra for exposure monitoring, an extensive audio menu, time code, and with movie silent control, excellent independence between stills and video. And while video recording is good, 4K recordings are limited to 10 minutes, HD 15. Incidentally, in video mode, the optical viewfinder isn't available. And while the overheating icon appears fairly quickly, this is 12 minutes into a 60-frame HD recording in a 21°C room, it did continue for a total of 28 minutes before shutting down with the standard power off setting. On the menu, that can be set to high. The Sports Finder setting reduces image size to M, but provides a wider view of the scene than the actual image frame. It's both puzzling and annoying. The optical viewfinder provides a wider field of view and a real-time view of the scene for burst shooting, and it keeps the full image size. Incidentally, the Sports Finder setting overrides the optical electronic switch. I recommend you avoid it. If I've got this wrong, and your X100V practice includes video or burst, please let me know, and I'll do a follow-up on those topics. Fujifilm provides some interesting desktop and mobile apps. The Camera Remote app simplifies the task of transferring images from camera to phone for posting on social media, and it has a couple of remote control options. X-Webcam turns the X100V into a webcam. X-Raw Studio turns your computer into a RAW conversion tool, but it can be confusing. The camera has to be connected while you use it. However, it can't import the images from the camera. And there's also the TCL X100II, an optional Tele conversion lens 1.4, making it effectively 50mm. That takes you from this view to this one. The closest focus distance is slightly longer at 17 centimeters. These Lego figures are 5 centimeters tall. A wide-angle conversion lens is also available. Both would be nice accessories to have. So while it's not all things to all people, and Fujifilm has provided slightly more options than I think are necessary, the X100V is an extraordinarily capable and powerful pocket snapper. And it's one of the prettiest cameras on the shelf. Then, with the leaf shutter, film simulations, its small size and physical controls, I completely understand why Vincent bought this model as his second camera. As my hashtag says, I'm not sponsored, so there are no interruptions while you're watching my videos. That decision has a financial impact, so those who have decided to support this channel by becoming members are my sponsors. We owe them our thanks for keeping this channel less commercial than most. And if membership is for you, please use the join button below. Now, I do enjoy reading and replying to your civil comments and relevant questions. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.